Talk to us. Ladies and gentlemen, we are live with directly linked due to Elon Musk satellites with Giles, who is coming to us live from CF Jingara. Welcome to the program, Giles.
Hey, everyone. Good to talk to you again, Diamond.
Now, this is the best internet connection we've ever had. It usually sucks, and there's all kind of interference. But the one thing I want to say, first of all, for anyone that's just tuning in tonight, because this is kind of prime time in the U.S., quickly go over who you are, how you know me, and what the F is CF Jingara. Because when I'm writing down the title of our podcast, I'm like, if you don't know who Giles is, you're not going to know what I'm talking about. So go ahead.
All right. So I'm Giles. I live down in southeast New South Wales, Australia. I'm about 55 to 60 kilometres outside of Australia's national capital, which is Canberra. I live at an elevated location on the edge of the Great Dividing Range between the coastal strip and the inland. So I get a really unique weather and climate around here, which is very predictable and very, very good. Now, about a year after Diamond started his channel, I started watching Diamond's channel, and I started picking up little bits and pieces. I started doing little bits of things around my farm here, started doing a few extra little bit of preps here and there. And then I started getting into the gardening side. I got in and I started doing more traditional agriculture, as in a traditional vegetable garden, bringing in lots of manure and building new garden beds, raised beds, all that sort of stuff. But there was always a desire to get to a more natural aspect. And the more I watched Diamond, I started coming back and commenting in shows, and I started supporting Diamond because I believed that the work that Diamond was doing was of great value to more people, and more people needed to see what Diamond was saying, particularly around the awareness of solar cycles, climate, permaculture, being self-sufficient, and being able to provide for yourself in scenarios. Now, the beautiful thing is that over the last couple of years, I've been able to put all of that practice into an outcome. And the outcome has been that over the last 12 months, I have basically used my prep scenarios. I've tested my prep scenarios, and it was all from learning from Diamond. But we'll come back to that in a minute. But that's a little bit of background on me. I'm a data information technology specialist, and I like studying solar cycles, climate, geomagnetics, and I try and build a nuanced picture for my friends and family around me about what I'm seeing coming down the pipeline in regards to climate, weather, solar cycles, geopolitical, etc. And my predictions are getting better and better, Diamond. It's pretty cool.
Well, that sounds like good news. And a lot of people really respect you and the work you did. And the video we put out last night's got, I think, 3,000 views at this point. So hopefully a lot of those will tune in tonight for our conversation. Now, a couple of the things that you just said are, you used to work in a pretty important position in, I don't know, was it the Australian government?
Yeah. So I've been a consultant to a number of government departments that are working on climate, weather, hydrology, and in particular, the last role that I was in was a fairly important role in generating a new a Northern Murray-Darling Basin data set, which allows for a greater accurate reporting on the amount of water flow.
The Murray-Darling Basin, this is where some of the craziest drought / then flooding events have occurred, where the bomb has been caught in some of the dumbest lies ever, or just the worst predictions ever. They were saying, it's never good. Yeah, I think about 6 years ago, it was never going to rain in Australia. And then boom, we got more rain than ever before in the last 3 days. So, and not only that, the bomb has been moving weather stations to make it hotter in Australia, just to keep up with the narrative, to keep the whole climate alarmist narrative alive. And they're other than NASA and NOAA, they're the #1 group on Earth that has been called out for their shenanigans.
So I'm going to call out another group right now. IBM, through Weather Underground, manipulating the small home weather station data as well. I keep two weather stations here that are the exact make and model of each other, and they both report data. I store one on an SD card and the other one goes directly to the internet. And the one that goes to the internet, the data gets manipulated by IBM through Weather Underground. So there are, even the technology companies are now getting into manipulating what people are seeing from their home weather stations to align more closely with the government's data. And I find that quite abhorrent, because it means that there's no way to prove through anything electronic and anything that's data connected now accuracy. Well, it's frustrating.
Well, that's why we have our channel. That's why Tony Heller has his channel, and many other scientists that are paleoclimatologists or multidisciplinary scientists that have not, we don't have any connection to the National Science Foundation or any governments where we need to keep up their narrative. We work on data sets and facts, and the same stuff I knew back in the 90s, Giles, hasn't changed today because of anything I've listened to in the media, by the way. I still look at the charts and the graphs, and I'm like, nothing they've said matches anything. But people, and this is the problem. Lee and I are going to be launching a new radio show in just about a week and a half now. And we're going to be talking about these topics that you can't talk on social media, any social media anymore about. There are certain topics that are completely banned, and you know, what they do is they prevent you from getting your voice out, and we don't want to do that. That's why we're starting this radio show. But if it's not clear to most of the people that have a little bit of time to research some of the topics, then I don't think that we're actually going to reach those people. But the people we want to reach are now just, you know, on the cusp. They're starting to hear some things and they're like, nothing's adding up. You know, climate emergency for 12 years, global warming, sea level rise, and they've lived on the beach or something. And they've seen Barack Obama buy a house in Martha's Vineyard, or they've seen all this kind of stuff go on. And these are the very people like Barack Obama, who was pushing that climate alarmist narrative to say that the sea levels were rising and everyone's going to be underwater. But recent reports from Australia, and just had Jen Marahasi on the show, because as soon as that report on the Great Barrier Reef came out, somebody has some splainin' to do. Now, there's two sides of that coin. There may have been a recovery in the reef or not. The reef may have been in a great shape for years. And the point is that they're doing bad science there. And I think eventually we got to the root there, that it was bad science being done and better science needs to be done. The bad science, though, was on purpose to simply perpetuate that climate agenda that the Barrier Reef is dying when in fact it's not.
And it's always highly political here in Australia, Diamond. Effectively, what you've had for the last 6 to 8 years is that you've had a pseudo-conservative government in power here in Australia, where they've claimed to be conservatives, but they're actually not. And they've drifted to the left, and they've gone very green. And then they lost the last election, and we now have a equivalent to a Democrat Green mix in our parliament. And all of the media has gone silent on climate change. You literally don't see anything in the media being aggressive to the government now about climate change. It's all about we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this, we're doing this. We're about to, you know, wipe out the economy by going to net zero by 2050. Yet Australia's agriculture can't do that, and so it's all going to be credit based. And so they're basically just going to print money and spend it in the wrong spot. Things like that. We are a very similar country to the US, but our organizational structure between our federal government and our state governments is quite different to what you've got in the US. And you've seen over the last couple of years how very well manipulated the Australian people have been by effectively being part of a police state. We are highly policed, and it means that a lot of people who want to speak out can't anymore, or won't, or they're afraid to because they'll lose their career. Now, over the last 12 months, because I haven't been attached to any government organisation, my security clearance has lapsed, and I've had a free voice. The reason why I shut down my website was because it was impacting my career potential for the future, because although I wasn't using any of the data that I was privy to through the places I was working, it was too close for them. And they said, look, we can't fundamentally attack your website because what you're presenting is a an interpretation of our data, but we don't appreciate you as an employee doing that. And so they asked me to shut it down. And the site's there. It's all there. It's just a case of I've just got to flick the switch and turn it back on. But I've got to be in that right spot where I can't be undermined, I can't be attacked, and I cannot allow for that to impede my ability to earn some dollars.
Yeah, so for now, you need to earn some dollars because you did this test, and we're going to talk about the test in a minute because I think this is amazing. But more importantly, I think we need to make it very clear here to the listener, and thank you all. This is a live show. This is one of the few very live shows that we're doing. So I know everyone in the house. Rusty Runs with Scissors is in the house. Bruce Gustafson, let's say hello to some people here. I'm sorry, Benji. Stack It Bot. Steffers J is here. Amanda Bowery, who she's from Australia, and she's changed the name. Yeah, you know Amanda. Stan Greffel, Gary. Let me see who I can point out here. Richard Kidd, James Ortiz, all welcome to the show. We're going to do some questions and answers later, so don't put any questions up now because you usually don't have any good questions. So write them down and save them for the final moments of the podcast where we're going to do some questions. Awesome. But before we get into that, let me just discuss what you just said and reiterate it in my own words here, because Leah and I talk about this all the time over dinner. This is kind of the stuff we talk about. We marinate on all the current news events, and we talk, and we have talking points, and we've been doing this for some time. And so, and I've been organizing against the government and against multinational corporations for now going on 2 decades. And so we have a lot of experience in the fact that volunteers don't ever really come out and volunteer. And then people that want to help don't actually really come out and help and stuff like that. But the most important thing is, why is this happening? Well, it's because people are busy and they are consumed with the rat race. So you and I are lucky, and we were just talking off air before we started, that you and I have a couple dollars together, but we don't have huge savings. You know what I mean? Our savings are extremely limited. You and I could basically put in an in-ground pool and then we would be poor. And so that being said, most people around the world are either like us or don't have any savings at all. And we're right on the cusp of that. If we were to put in an in-ground pool, we'd have nothing. And so, you know, we're living on the edge, and I have to get all this jaw and teeth work done. So basically all my savings, I'm putting it into my health because I don't want to have any problems with my teeth in the future. Those affect my heart and all human systems. And the only reason I know that is I have time to research it. People don't have time to research solar cycles. They don't have time to research climate cycles. They certainly don't have time to research the fraud at the bomb or mainstream media. And when you start saying things like that, they have been trained for about 15 years to say that when you and I start talking like that to them, that we're conspiracy theorists. They shut down. They react strangely as if we're racist, homophobic, anti-Semitic, and all the things that they've been trained by brainwashing through multinational corporations. I mean, it's the 7 corporations that own the media. Very few media outlets don't spew the same garbage. We live in a clown world filled with clown information that the sheep or the humans that have to go to work, support their family, and we refer to them as sheep, but they're not. Some of them really, I'm sure, want to know. And I don't like to disparage, almost 8 billion people that way. But you and I can agree that probably 6 to 7 billion people have no idea what we're talking about or can relate to.
Or they're just not simply allowed to know the data. And there are a lot of countries around the world with firewalls that prevent this sort of data from getting out. It's the media is very, very controlled here in Australia now too, as well. A few years back, a few government leaks got out, and the Australian Federal Parliament decided to put in some rules and restrictions against journalists actually doing their job. And so if you actually get any federal government leaks that you're provided and they can track you down, they're going to lock you up. Previously, whistleblowers were a common thing here in Australia, and there was always something leaking out of Parliament that would undermine a minister or a parliamentary officer who would then get the sack. and then things would get solved that way. But now the media are actually also, even with their own agenda, they're now afraid to actually report officially against what the government's doing because those controls are now in place. And so it's a dangerous game when you start to pinpoint out things that they've set their agenda on. I know that Jennifer and Tim and others from various different universities around Australia have got a really big weight on their shoulders because they are front and center for the reef. And the reef is one of the things that it's a huge draw card for Australia. The Great Barrier Reef brings in millions of dollars every year through tourism. And if you're telling the rest of the world that the reef is destroyed and damaged, people don't want to come to Australia anymore. With the problem, we've got this massive problem at the moment that we actually can't attract.
Wait a minute! Didn't that bite them on their ass? Now,
yeah, it really did. It really did. Because as soon as COVID basically disappeared, everybody just rushed into Queensland because everybody wanted to go to the reef, and everybody said, "What's wrong with it? I can't see what's wrong with it." And everybody's enjoying everything up there. You don't see on social media any reports of people saying, "Oh, yeah, it's really it's dead." You know, you go out there and you do a bit of a dive on the reefs, and there are fish everywhere. It may not be as colourful as some of the real central equator tropical reefs. Well, it is a different coloured reef, obviously, as Jennifer's shown.
It is in fact colourful now because the reef gets bleached. It gets bleached at regular intervals because of climate change.
Mm.
And a lot of people, they don't understand the process. So what can happen then is that the media can cherry pick. A couple scientists go out, they get some funding, say global warming, blah, 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 bleaching. They get this funding. They take pictures at a high enough level that they prove that, look, all of the reefs are bleached.
Yep.
And then it immediately affects tourism. So within 3, 5, 7 months, they're looking at the numbers because we were reporting on this coral bleaching a year, 2 years ago. They're looking at the numbers now and they're like, holy crap. We just listed on the UNESCO sites of damaged products. And we have a damaged reef. That's not good for us. And so they quick wrapped it up and got some scientists to go out there and say, oh no, it's great. Look, we looked at it from a different angle, angle of the dangle. But Maura Hassey comes out on my program to say, look, it's all bad science. If you want real science, this is how you do it. She's been doing the real science for years and telling the truth. When they were saying sea level was rising, it was falling. And when they were saying the reef was dying, it was growing. And with this recovery from the last bleaching event, the corals change colors. Now, the tourism board or whatever you call it in Australia could be using this to their advantage. This is one of the most colorful reefs. The Great Barrier Reef is the biggest reef ever. You could literally have 1 million people diving on it all at once, and it would be less populated than Disneyland. That's how big this reef is. I mean, it's so extensive. And yet they should be promoting the growth of the reef, but the narrative does not allow that. But yet they switch this. They certainly turn the knob, and everything is now discombobulated. So all the brainwashed people in Australia, everything was dying, is now like, wait a minute, the reef is the greatest it's been in since before global warming? How is that possible? So what's the sentiment of the actual human with not enough time? Because I'm sure you run into them at the supermarket or whatever, and you have friends. They're probably still brainwashed, in my opinion. What is the reality?
They are. And unfortunately, there are some really intelligent people who should know better, but it's a case of they don't want to rock the boat. And this is the problem that I've now got, is that the majority of intelligent people who I've been able to have conversations with and actually get a two-way conversation on this scenario of understanding that this is a cyclical event, and all of these events are largely cyclical. Yeah. There's pollution everywhere. I hate pollution. I can't stand pollution. It's a case of I do whatever I can to reduce the amount of pollution that I generate. But as soon as you start talking to these people about them actually doing anything, they walk away and they go, hang on, no, the government's going to do it. I'm going, well, what are you doing as an individual? I'm off grid here, and I explained that if I was to believe the full CO2 footprint thing, I would have one of the lowest CO2 footprints in my group of friends, bar one person who actually is further off grid than I am, but lives in a very remote location as a very special person. But no one who lives in the cities can actually then affect anything CO2 wise.
Look,
green energy wise.
I hate to break in, but therein lies the ruse.
Yes.
And that ruse is that no, you don't have to do anything. Just move into the city where people are being murdered and you get locked down at any moment and pay your taxes, because the government is going to use its tax system to tax carbon dioxide, which, by the way, is plant food and not pollution. And so since the late 60s, early 1970s, when the world was toxified by these multinational corporations dumping actual pollutants into the air and into the rivers, we came up with the Clean Water Act, which cleaned up some of the rivers. But these corporations still get away with dumping actual pollution into rivers every day, hundreds of millions of gallons. The farmers get the runoff of their pesticides. And we just reported in America, we went from 64% of native deer in Wisconsin, it was Michigan, with neonicotinoids in their gallbladders, raised to 96 fucking percent.
Yeah, that's insane.
In 2021. That means 100% of all deer have neonicotinoids in their kidneys and their gallbladder and their spleen. And guess where else that is? Their meat. Because that blood runs through the system. And we've known this for about 4 decades. The waterways in the St. Lawrence Seaway flowing between Canada and America, when they started doing testing in the 90s, they said, I think we found pharmaceuticals at the deep lake levels and in this channelway. And then by the 2000s, they found high concentrations of antidepressants in the water. So we have fish populations that are on antidepressants. We have humans that are consuming neonicotinoids, and there are millions of people that are suffering from cancer, that are dying out from celiac disease, and everyone is, oh my God, give me 6 more booster shots because I need myocarditis. I need to add some more pharmaceuticals to my protocol. When the reality is that, guys, if you're out there, grandma was right. You are what you eat. And Giles and I've been trying to tell you that. This guy listened. And so let's just go over. Now, we're going to go deep here. We've gotten through the ruse from the mainstream media. We've gotten through the fact that multinational corporations now control the world, and they're now paying off people to get into this globalist market so they can have more grip on us. And we know that we're not going to get through to the sheeple, because people that work around us, and when we show them what we're doing, and we talk about what we think, they get scared and they're like, no, I don't want to know about that. I want to go back in my hole. I want to make a better budget so I can actually buy food, which will be probably off the table in about 3 or 4 months. And I just want to ignore it. And all you and I are saying is don't ignore it, because if you embrace it, you can live the same exact life with abundance, with self-reliance, peace of mind. I mean, the peace of mind, when I started thinking about this 2 decades ago, I was like, every single thing I can put up is peace of mind. Now, this is the way the entire world worked in, let's go back to 1890, 1910. Every single family, extended family that was living together, they were thinking about peace of mind. So they grew a garden, they canned stuff, they put it up. And even if it's the worst winter ever, Giles, everyone knew that we had tomato, we have all this stuff. And even if we don't need it, we have it. So we're golden. That's what we're talking about.
It's why I'm in this building right now, because this little greenhouse that I put in 2019, which was around the end of my channel at the time, 2019, 2020. This was just finishing up and starting to come onto fruition. Now, I've eaten continuously throughout the previous 2 winters out of here, and very little has been needed to come out of the garden. And for $20 or $30 worth of seeds, I've produced enough food to take into town to my parents, to my sisters, to give away to friends. I've got new friends who have moved into a farm just up the road who are other preppers as well. Sharing things around from what you can produce during winter is fantastic. And knowing where your food comes from and that you've put the effort into actually create the food, it's so rewarding, and it brings your immune system up, because you know that when you do the right soil testing. Now, I've been using Matt Power's last soil book very, very comprehensively, and I've been doing soil tests to know what minerals and what amendments I need to put into the soils. And the quality of the food that's coming out now is phenomenal. And it's instantly from within a 24 to 48 hour period, you can tell the difference between eating food from outside, which is not amended, to food amended inside the greenhouse. You can feel your energy levels and your strength change just through the good food coming into your body, bringing all those additional amendments in that you need that don't exist in commercial food that you get from a supermarket or a greengrocer anymore. Unless you're actually getting that food from a very particular source, and you know where that farm and their practices is, the majority of the food is. I don't like buying food anymore, because I just don't like the food. It doesn't taste right. It doesn't feel right in my body after I've eaten it.
Agree.
The difference being is that if I buy, and I've done the test. I've done the test in the last 12 months, because I effectively ran as much as I possibly could from the property here. I did a couple of tests when I did go to the store to get a few things just on a whim. I thought, I'll do a test. I'll buy a couple of bits and pieces of vegetables and I'll see what my body does. And so I cooked almost the exact same meal as I'd cooked from what I grew here, and I felt like crap. And I just do not trust the quality of the food coming out of the generic grocery food chain and the generic market gardeners. Those that understand the fundamental principles of permaculture and the understanding of soil are generating fantastic food, but it's very expensive. If you go to some of the markets in town, you'll find there's a couple of stalls that have little permaculture stalls, and you can literally spend $10 for 4 radishes, where your supermarket radishes, the same 4 radishes at the supermarket will cost you $1. So they are expensive because there's a lot more effort into it, but the quality and the nutrient level and the mineral intake that you're getting from those people who are actually generating real food, as I call it, your body just responds. Now, I've lost over 30 kilos in the last 18 months just from eating a more natural diet, a more raw food diet. But I've also been, I haven't been eating much meat from the butchers. I've been hunting in the area. Now, I'm in the headwaters of the river system that I'm near, which is the M.I.A River, which means that there's no commercial agriculture above me here. And so all of the soil and all of the land around here doesn't have any agriculture.
Same here.
Pesticides, sprays. The water table is fantastic, and I can pull water from the ground, and I've tested it. It's beautiful. So I chose this location before actually seeing programs from yourself and other people, but for whatever reason, this land called out to me, and there was so much that attracted me to this place, and it seems that I might have known that I was going to do what I was going to do. But yes, the food is so important, mate.
Well, the prana in the food is the energy, and that's what you're talking about. There's certain practices that talk about pranic foods and the amount of energy in the foods, and you reduce the prana in the food based on the growing practices. But if we add on to that, now that's just some scientific evidence from actually looking at growing practices in food. If you add on to that some of the scientific evidence that has occurred with structured water and intention, and that's what I'm getting to here. People want to dive deep here. Let's talk about the power of intention. If you're intending to grow the most nutrient dense foods with the greatest practices, the foods are going to react, and they react the same way that they react to playing music in a greenhouse. They grow more abundantly. So when we have the intention to add bean,
that's why the radio's here.
Yeah. Or do the permaculture principles. Literally, I'm about to do a video because I've been building the soils here, which were not even soils since the beginning here. They were just mud and dust, and really haven't seen much effect until the last several years. But this year I started incorporating some of the biodynamics in the farm, where we're really processing the chicken poop in a way where we're culturing it more like beam, where we're heating it the right way and adding moisture. And I spread it around this year, just like I've done every year. In the first year, I just kept it for a year and spread it around, just like every farmer does. The second year, I heated it a little and did a little this and spread it around. This year, we're going to do something even more spectacular, because after we heated it and spread it around, there are certain plants growing where I added this medium that are growing 10 times more green and more vigorous than any other plant I've ever seen in my life. And there's no explanation. So it's not an accident. It's the intention and the practices we're using that's creating this abundance. And it's as simple as that. You cannot begin to create a sustainable, abundant system unless you begin to start by failing and going against the systems that you're actually using. And if you do it long enough, like if you fail long enough, like you and I have, at some point you get to this point where you're like, this is not a failure. This is the most abundant system that I could have ever expected. And I don't even know what to do with this food.
Absolutely. You know, as you and I have talked on a number of occasions, I've experimented with EM1. I've experimented with bringing in fungal loads from the local pine forest to change some of the soil balance here, so that I've got a greater balance between bacteria and fungi. You know, just little experiments all around the place, and I'm finding now that the less I interact, but just gently add little bits of amendment, the better response I get. Now that could also be because I'm on a very ancient clay soil here. I'm right in between two volcanic zones, and there's a strip of sedimentary shales and clays here, but it's very high minerals, and so I don't really need to add a lot of mineral intake. I just need to get charcoal or biochar, and I need to get things like iodine and some boron into the soil and some molybdenum. But otherwise, the rest of the mineral content's great, because there's a lot of minerals in the soil around here, because there's actually a mine not too far away that has zinc, copper, lead, gold, the works in it. So there's a lot of mineral content in the area. But as you experiment with the soils and you start to see, I've done little trial plots where I've gone one 30 centimeter area, I've put an amendment there. Next to it, I've put the next amendment, and the next plot next to it, I've done the next amendment. So I've built these little patches where I've gone, test that, test that, test that. What's the response? And because I've got space here, I can do that. Now, if you're on a smaller plot, or you've got a little backyard garden, you can't exactly do that. But as soon as you've got an acre or two, and you can tinker a little bit every now and then, just testing what a soil amendment does here, what a bit of biochar does there, what a bit of EM1 does there, what a bit of fungal compost from the local forest up the road, you end up seeing the results. And then you can build your next series of garden beds or an area around your fruit trees to incorporate that change for the next season. And this is the thing, each season I'm getting better at what I'm doing, but each season the quality of the food that's coming out is getting better. It's tasting better. I'm getting sweeter fruit. I'm getting higher mineral levels, because I've actually tested some of the fruit. I've got a friend who works for the CSIRO in food chemistry area, and I take a bunch of my bits and pieces to her, and she just goes and does her standard tests on them. And she says, this has changed, this has changed, this has changed.
Yeah,
you're missing a bit of this, and you know, to me, that's a huge benefit. But that marries up pretty much where Matt Powers has now gone with his soil microscopy. So it's a case of I'm excited by this sort of stuff because I'm learning through my little experiments what the next step is. And each year I will get better and better and better at this.
Yeah. So the more, and what we both find is the more you do, the better it gets.
Absolutely.
Something's less better and something's more better, but I've never had worse. Everything I do is either just slightly better or extremely more better. And that's where the learning comes.
Yep.
Now, as far as the quality and your testing, Giles, you really don't need to send this out. You froze up a little on my end, but you're probably not froze up on the main video. No, you're not.
I can hear you.
So you just froze up on my end. But there's a really easy way to test the quality of your produce, and that is with a Brix Meter. And I have several in our store. I think Matt Power sells one, but it's the ones in our store on the Amazon store are just the best Brix meters on the market for the lowest price. They get the highest rating. And what that just tests is how long your food can store. And it's based on the sugar content and the nutrient density. If your sugar is high and the nutrient density is high, you can literally put a high Brix, something that's growing from a farm like yours and I, where we have this mycorrhiza communicating with the fruit. They tell the fruit that you are the best fruit ever. And they give them the information to allow them to have high Brix. And this allows the fruit, if there's a drought. So I'm going back to the natural environment. If there were a drought and no human picked this fruit, the fruit will be able to sit on the vine after the vine died and ripen for months, 3 to 5 months if it didn't get frozen. And it would become the most amazing fruit. And this is for nature. This is for the animals. It's not for you or me or for any oligarchic, psychopathic money grubber. When we do the work we do in the fields, it's because we can have the most resilient farms, the nutrient dense foods that the foods themselves know they are so nutritious that they don't want to go bad. That's the kind of fruit I want to store. That's the kind of food I want to eat. And that's the kind of food I want to offer to my neighbors and my friends in the future when these systems collapse. Now,
absolutely.
Yeah. So we're both doing what we need to be doing. And a lot of people out there hate us for doing what we're doing because they don't have the land, they don't have the time, the opportunity. But guess what, guys? You can meet Giles and I if you're our neighbors, and you can come to events. You can become part of our community. I'm sure there's lots of neighbors around Giles that would love to know what he's doing and become more food secure. And people in my community already know who I am. But the point is that you don't need a permaculture farm. You can meet permaculture farmers. You can support the work we're doing. Help us out. You can also start growing your own food at a smaller scale. Even if you live in an apartment, you can be growing it in 5-gallon buckets. You can be learning how to grow your own food with amazing nutrient-dense soils and do this yourself, where you can grow food that will have a shelf life for weeks, if not months. But let's finish up the podcast. It's going to go long. Let's do about 10, 20 minutes on your experience on when you quit the government job, you shut it down. I know you had some family things go on, and we all had things to work through during the COVID epidemic, but nothing more than what happened in Australia. And wow, did you come out ahead of the game, and we appreciate you for that. Just tell folks what happened when you did a live role play experiment on preparedness and survival.
Okay, so about this time last year, I was a member of social media. I was on different forums. I was connected up the wazoo with a whole stack of people around the world, collecting information, being part of their little bubbles and all that sort of stuff. And there were some family health issues that occurred where I needed to spend time with other people. I had a real strong decision point to make about my future at the same time. And so I really decided that I needed to just disconnect from the world. And so you'd been talking about for a long time, disconnect from the world, do your own thing, learn about it. And so I did. And so all the last 6 to 8 years of doing small preps here and there, I'd collected enough resources where I believed, I wouldn't need to go to the shop for 12 months. And, I really didn't. And I've only gotten through a small percentage of my prep food in particular because of the amount of food that I'm growing here and the ability to hunt in the local region, fishing in the local region, etc. So during COVID, the lockdowns really didn't impact me here at all. The zone for the lockdown was my local government area. My local government area is about 150 to 200 square kilometres. And so I could drive wherever I wanted. I could go to the local shops. I could go fishing. I could go hunting. I could go for a bike ride out on the country roads, whatever. You know, it really didn't impact me. If I went near a city, though, it was a totally different story. You know, you were almost questioned as you drove through checkpoints and things like that at one point. And so I walked away from the city and I basically said, Mum, Dad, sisters, sorry, you're not going to hear from me for a while. I'm going to go quiet. I'm going to resolve what I need to resolve internally within my mind and my body. Now, luckily, I didn't run that silent period too long with my family because I needed to be part of that family and I needed them to know that I was okay. And so I learned how to meditate. And by learning how to meditate, I started listening to my body. But not just that, I started to listen to the parts of my mind that I'd never heard before. And so I'm completely and utterly aware of different things now that I wasn't aware of previously because I was spending too much time looking at what other people are doing on social media, looking at what the media is saying continuously, what the government's saying. And as soon as you detach from that and you get the opportunity to have some silence in your life and you start to concentrate on what's good for your body and for your mind, you start to question a lot of what we've been doing for the majority of our life and why are we doing what we're doing. And
brilliant.
What value there is in the future in continuing down that path when there's so much coming down the pipeline at the moment that's changing everybody's lives without them actually seeing it because all they're seeing is what's being put on the phone in front of them or the tablet in front of them or, you know, what, you know, half dozen crazy conspiracy theorists are telling them on Telegram or whatever.
Can I break in?
Go for it, mate.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know any of this, guys. If you're watching live, I didn't know the history of Giles or any of this, but it touches my heart. And he's not the only one. There are dozens of people that have contacted me, you know, every month about the same kind of awakening where they were interested in the program in the beginning and they listened and they did something. That's the key here. And this is the same key. And I talked to Giles about how I have to go into the prison tomorrow, the same prison I go into every month for years to bring a message of hope to these inmates. And I have jury duty tomorrow and they have me coming in there, but there's no way I can serve on the jury because I know all the inmates. I know them in a different way than when they committed their crimes. And this is the difference in humans. Humans have the capacity to do horrible things and they have the capacity to do great things. And there is a very fine line.
Yeah.
And I'm one of the humans that have crossed the line both ways. And thankfully, Giles, you're not one of the other humans. But because of what I did, it doesn't, no matter what I did, and here's the funny thing, I didn't really do anything. I grew cannabis and mushrooms. But back in at that time, it was a felony.
Yeah.
And all of the people in criminal justice looked at me as a horrible human. And then they looked at my rap sheet and they were like, you have a graduate degree?
Yeah.
And so, I mean, wait a minute. How can we personify this person as a horrible human? He got a scholarship and he has a graduate degree in climatology. But how it So it's hard to portray. Here's the point. The point is that we live in a clown world and a lot of people are screwed up. And the stuff we've been talking about for years, and me in particular, since the beginning of my observations that multinational corporations are killing humans, that the powers that be are not out there to help us. And yet there are still the majority of the population, over 90% of the people out there, and 90% of the people are not listening to this program. But the people listening to this program are trying to get through to them. There's no way to get through to them. It has to be their own awakening. The same thing for people addicted to drugs and alcohol. You can't help someone that doesn't want help. You can't help someone see that's not willing to look. It's that simple and it's that egregious. But you and I have lived through it, and we know that everything we said is possible, that there is a new paradigm possible. There is a new way to grow food that is filled with energy that can heal you, and that you don't need these other options, the sick care, which is we now call health care. There would be no need. There would be no cancer. There would be no celiac disease. There would be no mental illness.
Well, my asthma's gone, mate. Because of my change in diet and because I gave up drinking alcohol. I used to be a chronic asthmatic. It was not really a really strong asthma, but it was enough that, that would impact my firefighting, that would impact my ability to exercise and all that sort of stuff. It's gone. I've given away every single piece of pharmaceutical that I was on, and just through the natural diet, my body's responded in the way I'd hoped it would. Now, whether that's because I'm imparting positive energy into my thought processes when I'm meditating and breathing, and the food combined, the scenario, the peace and the quiet here, and it's a low stress environment. Everything's worked out really well. And as you and I were talking before the podcast, I literally dropped my resume into the marketplace a day or two ago, and a whole bunch of former employers rang up and said, take your resume off the marketplace, just come and work for us. Better dollars on what you're on, easier work than what you're on. Let's go. We need you. And so the power of positive thoughts and positive energy is amazing, because you can actually project it to others, and you can actually project outwards from yourself that you are the right person at the right time to do something. And so I can only say that the last 12 months have been life-changing for me. There's a couple of people who are watching the video at the moment who have just sent me text messages, who know this process because I talked to them, and they're friends of mine that I've stayed in contact with, and they've seen they're seeing the change in me physically as well. But from a mental perspective, I'm super on the ball with just about everything now, and very little actually gets me wound up to the point where I would crack or do something stupid or say something stupid, where previously, if I got upset or angry, I'd go have a drink, and then I'd get on social media and say something stupid. And the flowback effects of that coming back into your life is horrific. And so you can get away from that sort of thing and be positive, but be strong at the same time. Don't give away everything you've got. Okay, there's a lot of people who will literally give away every bit of energy that they've got. You've got to hold on to that baseline to keep yourself strong no matter what. But when you're positive people get attracted to you. You start getting a completely different interaction with people once your mindset is stable. And thank you for the text message, Jeff. It's the whole flow and effect is amazing, and I can't speak highly enough for being able to reset your mind and body together at the same time. I now know from this period of time where my gaps are in my preps. And I've built a list. I'm working on it, but I've got to go back to work soon to actually earn enough dollars to actually enact those changes. And I'm going to do that. The reality is that there's a a number of us that see some fairly interesting things coming down the pipeline in the next 12 to 18 months. And so I want to be ready for those. And I don't think it's going to take that much to actually get to the point where I've got the resilience built into everything that I've done, both mentally, physically, and around me, that I'll be ready for any scenario. And there's a lot of preppers out there that aren't ready. There's a lot of preppers who think that they can hunt their way out of a situation, particularly in the US now, obviously with all that poisoning going on with the deer. You wouldn't want to be eating that anyway. Just get growing. Get your hands dirty. Get your hands in the soil. It's good for you.
Well, that's the major problem. The major problem is that, and we know about this from historical data, is that the major cities in the Northeast, out near Michigan, those places, when the shit hits the fan, those animals are going to get hunted out, and those animals are filled with pesticide. They're disgusting. So it's not really a good hedge for you. It's not a food security solution, which I will bring to you at the Crestone Energy Fair just coming in a few days. Food security solutions are things that you and I have worked through for 8-10 years of our lives. Whenever you began and I began, we knew that growing our own food and making it the most nutrient dense is important. This affects our life. It affects our gut bacteria. But I think the most important part, based on all the studies I've done over 2 decades, is the power of intention. The only reason that I was able to get to where I was, Giles, in the state of permaculture bliss, we have over 100 acres on the same river that's completely protected. There are no oil and gas industries here. There's no pollution. There's no neonicotinoids. There's nothing. There's nothing here. It's brilliant. Our bees are natural. Our honey it's medicinal. It's probably better than Mayuka honey, which people pay like $26 for a half a pound for. I mean, it's that good. And you and I know how you feel when you change your diet from one thing to the next. I've had access to tons of bad food, but when you start eating good food, your body understands that this food is the food that's right for you. And there's less craving for bad food. It's just how it works. If you can come out and start eating raspberries and strawberries for breakfast before you've opened the greenhouses, before you've made your first coffee, after you had coffee, I'm not even hungry till like 11 o'clock. And then I'll eat a couple of snap peas, and maybe I'll just pick a baby squash off the vine and pound that. And then my whole body knows that it has all the nutrients I need for the entire day. I mean, it's that simple.
I just come out to my greenhouse, and
carrots.
At lunchtime, I just pull up a couple of carrots like that, and snack on those. There's always kale in here. There's always spinach. I've always got nasturtium growing all the way through winter, so I've got a high volume of vitamin C through the flowers of the nasturtium as well, and the leaf. We say nasturtium. Nasturtium, sorry. Okay. And I probably should have said that, but anyway, it's just spelling it out. But they're too peppery for me. I don't even like those flowers. I just like the little sweet end where the nectar sits. Okay. Because I've also got the bees very close, and so they actually come in on a continual basis. But they've got a big patch of mustard, which I put in. Yeah, the brassicas. That's amazing. Yeah. It's winter there, and his brassicas are blooming, and it's basically winter here all year, the whole time. And so our brassicas are always blooming. So even in the middle of our peak summer here, it's the same as winter in Australia where Giles is. So he is way more abundant than we are. This is the most where we are is the most difficult place to grow food in the entire world, other than the Arctic Circle. And there are places in the Arctic Circle that are better than here. And guess what, Giles? We have enough food to feed 15 people here, all the way through the winter. And, so I want to show and I haven't even ramped it up. This is just what I can do. Yeah. So I want to show you a third of my Jerusalem artichoke crop. So this is a full wheelbarrow full of Jerusalem artichokes, which I picked a couple of weeks ago, and I've kept them in the soil. But there were 3 wheelbarrow loads, and I sold 2 wheelbarrow loads, and I sold them for $16 a kilo to a organic supermarket in Canberra. They want me to plant an acre next year. So I can actually make a good profit from Jerusalem artichokes next year because I've worked out how to get the most out of them with the soil that I've got, and
Well,
to then store them.
What's that US dollar translate?
Oh, all right. So you're probably looking in, it's about 70 cents. So you're probably looking at about $11 a kilo. 11 US dollars a kilo.
That is like top dollar. That's like cannabis money.
Yeah, well, in the stores, they're selling them for more than double that. So it's a case of I'm also doing a bunch of other cover crops at the moment out here. That's all the trash left over from the Jerusalem artichokes, because they got up to the top of these posts. They were over 3 meters in height and had flowers everywhere. They were tremendous.
Our Jerusalem artichokes this year have spread so well, and because of the wet year, we're in a desert. Because of the wet year, this is the first year that every group has flowered. They usually don't flower here, which means we will have, just thinking about the ground cover, probably maybe 180 to 300 pounds of Jerusalem artichoke.
Yep.
And that could feed the entire valley for a month.
Absolutely.
For quite some time.
So I'm actually going to be using the Jerusalem artichoke also for soil amendment because they are a very high carbohydrate vegetable. And they will die and rot in the ground and create soil. So I've noticed this change in the soils around this area where I was growing them.
Yeah, so let me give you a tip. What we did was we planted the first Jerusalem artichokes about 5 years ago, and we watered them, and we tried to keep them healthy every year, but they really weren't producing. They started producing after the 3rd year pretty well because we started watering them and amending the soil. And now there are listen, if you could take the volume from 12 inches down, 15 inches wide from where the crop is, it is 100% Jerusalem artichoke. There's no dirt. It is
That's right.
Such a heavy crop. If we were to plant this in fields and be able to get this to market within that week, we could feed the world on Jerusalem artichoke.
Oh yeah, everybody would be very, very smelly and farty, but the reality is that it's an enormously nutrient dense food. And as you and I talked about a year ago, if you just leave them in the ground, they'll just keep coming back, and they'll keep coming back, and they'll keep coming back. You only need to put a little bit of amendment into them. For me,
even where I am, look, Giles, in Zone 5A, we don't pull them out. They overwinter, and there's a 100% spread annually.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. I started with 7 Jerusalem artichokes that were tiny, that arrived from a friend in the mail. And first year I got 25 from that. That 25 created 310 kilos. So that's about 600 pounds. Because each wheelbarrow holds about 100 kilos. So phenomenal amount. The other parts of the permaculture garden here, all the fruit trees are going really well. This area here are all the swales that I created with the excavator in 2019. And they're now all full of huge amounts of compost in the actual cup part of the swale, because I did micro swales rather than a big long swale. Each of the cups effectively is now filling up with masses of compost, and the trees that are sitting on top of the swale are actually now pushing their roots down into those cups. So they're getting lots of water, they're getting lots of nutrients, and I'm not having to feed any of these plants because the compost effectively with rain just runs down and gets caught in these areas and generates the food for the trees. It's a fantastic setup. It's so low maintenance. You have to do so little work.
Now, we set this up too a few years earlier than you did, and our swales are filling.
Yes.
So this is what I implore everyone to do. Did you do your swales Hugel?
No, I did 2 Hugel swales, and if you with the timber that I've got here in Australia, using eucalypt in these Hugelkultur swales, it's really a long-lasting timber in the ground. And so you end up getting just lumps of timber forming as the rest of it all falls away. And so I've gone away from the Hugelkultur a little bit, and I'm probably going to put a bit more effort into growing more of these acacia species. The acacia melanoxylon, which also puts on a huge amount of flower for the bees, but it's a nitrogen fixer, a bit like your locust that you've got over there. And it's a native to the area, but its timber, when you put it in the ground, generates beautiful soil. So I'm going to start using more of that in the future versus the eucalypt, which is a very resinous timber. It's very long standing in the ground.
We used pine so that the Hugel mounds, they've been collapsing rapidly. So a 6 foot high Hugel curve that we put in place will compact to 3 feet in 4 years. So it reduces by 50% if you use pine. Probably only 10, 20% if you're using eucalypt. But the point is that this gives you opportunity that each year, that as your Hugel curves, because you want to curve them on slope, you want to find the slope of your property, you want to make these curved Hugel beds or these raised beds to capture that water, which Giles and I have both learned about from reading, and then we did it and it works. So it's 100%, it works. But they fill up in between the mounds with this amazing compost, which then rot and discharge into the deep roots of the future, the further down Hugel mound. But every year it gives you opportunity to build up the mound with your own homemade compost, which we cannot implore you to make every year. You need to have a biodynamic farm where you're like, look, he's got a tree behind him. All that leaf material goes into sheet mulching, into his new compost piles, right? You put some poop down, you put some dirt down, you put some rot down, you put some green down, you put some grass down, and you just keep layering it. And where you are, it rains so much that you actually make compost. Where we are, we wet it and we cover it and we bake it. So there's different techniques, but in the spring, ding, ding, early, let's say February, March, where I am, where you are, you can do it probably in January. You want to dump that compost onto the mounds, build them back up, and wait for the spring planting.
Yeah, well, I'm definitely going to be doing a very, very large top-up year this year coming around the gardens.
Top-up, I love it.
Yeah, it's just topping up the beds, a little bit here, a little bit there. But all of the leaf material here on this eucalypt will go through the mulcher soon. I just wanted to show you, these are 2 trees. They're both about 30 to 40 meters tall, and they've literally fallen over. Now, the reason why they've fallen over,
that's 120 feet if you're American.
Yeah, so there's a pool of water sitting down the bottom in the clay here, and the thing is, eucalypts don't have a taproot. They've only got ground spreading roots, but I'll get up on top of the tree so you can get an idea of the size of it. So it's a decent sized tree. That's actually landed in my pond, in my dam below the house here. Again, another one. The ground is so wet here now that I'm walking down the tree here. I'm not going to fall off. There we go. That with a bit of wind and a bit of snow, these huge trees are just falling down. Now I've got half of these around here are being damaged by them falling over. There's another one just up there. There's another 2 just up there. They've all fallen over just in the last month from inundation, effectively. Further down the hill, I've got 40 or 50 trees that are dying because it's too wet. They survived the 2019 drought, where I had 400 millimeters of rain in 1 year, which is exceedingly low for here because I average around 900 to 1,000 mils. And the last 2 years it's been 1,600 or 1,800 mils. This year I reckon it'll be close to 2,000 millimeters. It'll be probably the wettest year on record.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the solar cycles then.
Sure.
I got the map up here. Here's the graph. Solar cycle 15 through 25.
Yep.
And in your last little expose that we put up last night, which is only 3 minutes, you were just referring to back here, the solar minimum in 2010, there was a snow event, and I think you said 2012 or 13?
2011, the first year that I arrived here, there was a very large snow event, and it happened almost in an identical fashion to the one we just had. Literally identical.
It's the same spot in the solar cycle, 2011 to today. Yep.
But it's a common thing when I go back through the cycles, and then I go back through the records. Now I was very lucky. At one point in time, I was doing some cleaning up of our fire shed for the local fire brigade, and found all these old handwritten records. And all the handwritten records were from the local mine, where they recorded every bit of weather since the 1870s. And so I was lucky enough to get a copy of all that. And that allowed me to actually see all the events. And then I laid that over the top of the solar cycle data. And surprise, 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 most of the big weather events that are anomalous follow the cycles. But you don't see it until you actually get the data. That's the problem. There's so much of historical data that you can't get your hands on anymore. You can get copies of the digital record. Here in Australia, if you want to get bulk data from the Bureau of Meteorology, you have to pay for it now. I'm an Australian taxpayer. I paid a hell of a lot of tax for 28 years of my career so far, and as an Australian taxpayer, it pisses me off that I have to pay for more to just get to data that I've already paid for as a taxpayer.
Well, let's drop a bomb on these droughts right here for the people. All right, we've got the Federation drought at the turn of the century. This is during the Dalton minimum. Then we've got the Centennial minimum drought of 1914-15, the 1925-28 Dust Bowl drought, which preceded the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl, the World War II droughts, 1967, the driest drought, which led to the Ice Age scare, and 1973, the wettest year ever, followed by the big dry, which is now. And now we can clearly see here a 1,000-year cycle taking place. And we can also see the 60-year cycle, 1967 being the driest, and then another big dry. That is the M.I.A, and the Pacific multi-decadal oscillation and the Atlantic multi-decadal oscillation lining up to give us climate change. And all the cycles are lining up, but yet the bomb doesn't want to address these cycles.
Well, unfortunately, look, I can't speak for them, because it's a case of if I do, I'm not the place to do so. But the reality is that they've effectively manipulated data for such a long period of time to adjust small amounts here and there, where they've effectively cooled the past to warm the future. They've got a majority of their weather stations and their new Stevenson screens in locations where they're effectively part of a heat island. When you start looking at some of the data for rural weather stations, you see a massive shift away from what they're actually talking about. Now, my offline electronic weather station, I calibrated against a very high quality automated weather station that government departments use here for localized weather reporting during fire events. And so I know that my systems here are calibrated as well to my elevation. And a lot of the issues that are occurring at the moment is that most of the weather systems around are actually either poorly calibrated, or they're sitting in locations which are environmentally influenced by the heat island effect of a town or a city or a road, or even just being next to some bare ground versus sitting over a grassy lawn, which is where the majority of weather stations would have been located in the past. And so I can understand why they believe they need to tinker with the data to adjust or homogenize it, as they call it. But from a data management perspective, from a purist perspective, they should also allow for access to the empirical data prior to the actual cleaning, sanitizing, or homogenization of the data. And therefore, they would allow for data specialists who, as a hobby, look at this data and can see trends inside it. Now, I've got that through my own data set locally, and I've got through a few friends in parts of New South Wales who send me their weather station data on a regular basis. They're doing something very similar to myself. There are a group of people around that don't fundamentally believe the low temperatures are accurately reported. They seem to divert a degree to 1.1 degree away from those low temperatures. And in many circumstances, it's snowing or you're getting ice forming overnight, and they've said it's 1 degree overnight or 2 degrees overnight. And the thing, it just doesn't match up. The reality versus the data that they're providing is so infinitely different that until someone can stand up with a level of strength and say, hey, you guys are going beyond it, I doubt much will change here in Australia. There's just too much. There's too much opportunity for you to have no career or for you to be unable to earn money as soon as you speak up.
I can agree here. The amount of improper motivation in Australia is egregious. And that means that if you say the wrong thing at the wrong time in the wrong place, even if it's a few years ago, it's a non sequitur, and you are no longer allowed to participate. This is the type of
I know this very well.
Culture. It's the type of cancel culture that is making people vomit in their own mouths.
Yeah.
This is not the world. Go ahead.
If you remember, you and I had a conversation when I was in my office at work, and I think it's one of your videos from 2019, 2020, when we were talking about the bushfires. I was doing one from my office, and I agreed with you about a statement around them prioritising protecting national park over people's properties, and the RFS were very, very, very quick to come back and basically say, you will never be allowed back into the fire brigade.
Yeah, these people are vultures, and they're not working on practical information to help humans. They're not working on practical information to help humanity, and they could care less about what you actually think, because what you actually think could go against their protocol and their narrative, and whatever that is has nothing to do with you as a human. Yeah.
And unfortunately, it's getting worse every year. There seems to be a continual step up. Recently here in Australia, there's been a whole stack of media releases around people should not be having backyard chickens because of the high levels of lead in Australian soils in many locations. And during COVID, everybody just went and found something to keep them busy. And a lot of people built little backyard chicken pens and little backyard gardens. The gardening side of what occurred here in Australia was phenomenal. Nearly every single person I know put in a small veggie garden, or they put in a fruit tree, or they did something in their garden that they would have never have done before.
That didn't happen here, Giles.
Yeah. Well, you literally couldn't buy seeds for about 3 months, and you couldn't buy fruit trees or berries from garden stores. It wasn't supply chain. It was purely because they sold out. They couldn't keep up with the demand because people were effectively locked at home. And, when you're locked at home, you're not having to travel for work. And so you're regaining 35, 40 minutes a day, maybe an hour. And then all of a sudden, because you're not going out for lunch and you're not buying things at a cafe or anything like that whilst you're in the office, all of a sudden you got a few extra dollars around. And people were going, Mum used to garden or Dad used to garden. Why don't I put something in? And there was this flourishing of home gardening going on, and it's still continuing right now. A lot of home gardeners did a lot of work, and they've learnt a lot here in Australia in the last 2 years about having some level of preparedness. Now, we're very different here in Australia because we have a very big boom and bust cycle with rain and drought. A lot of people do have some basic level of preparedness. We have government agencies in each of the states where they basically say, preparedness, you need to have this, 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 and this. And if you go onto, say, just the New South Wales government website and type in preparedness or being prepared, they'll give you a list of the things that you need to be prepared for a month where you can survive at home with what you've got because of bushfires and flooding and things like that. I've not seen any of that occur in any other country. Maybe it's just because of our geographic location that and a very dispersed population. We've definitely changed in the last 2 years. I can see that, but on the other scale, the government's got more powerful.
So let's take a few questions. How about we do that?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay. Kristen Adams, she had to leave the podcast, but I'm sure she'll rewatch this. So she says, no one does research like Diamond and Giles. Please like and subscribe. Now, we both come from different ends. I'm not researching anything in Australia except when I do podcasts with Jennifer or something like that. But or I get a report on the bomb with fraudulent reporting. You know it better than I do. And I think a lot of people respect you because you are from Australia and they can listen to you more than I can. But the same thing has been happening here across the pond, by the way. And Kristen wants a prediction on the winter. I don't know how the solar cycle in Australia, but I know how it works here in my region in the Rockies. And we've been in a snow deficit for years, and it's been slowly ramping up. When we first moved here, it was a banner year, but then it's been kind of dropping off. But based on historical data, and unfortunately we use that, Giles. I mean, poo-poo us. But the data is showing that this year is a ramp up in snow here, and then next year is even bigger, and then 3 years out would be a record snow event, which is why I did did you see the podcast I did on the major flood that could happen in California? Yeah.
Yes.
That, based on atmospheric rivers, what is the one thing you've heard me say for 3 years about California? Atmospheric river, atmospheric river, atmospheric river. It's building. So all we need is the big snow year. And last year and the year before, we're building snow years in the Sierras. This year, I think we could get one of those 80-foot years in the Sierras where we can get 80 foot of snow. And people are like, 80 foot of snow? He's making shit.
It's hard to comprehend that amount. It really is.
No, that's 100 feet of snow has been seen here. And we all know that, certain people ate each other as they were trying to move to the west. We know about the Donner Party. So, and that was one of those years when there was 80 foot of snow. So once that year sets up, and then we have the breakdown of the jet stream like we have because of the sun weakening, the magnetic excursion. I mean, anything is possible. And I just reported tonight earlier today that NOAA and NASA are reconsidering the 1,000-year flood. Now, that's a stupid thing. I'm a geologist. I'm a paleoclimatologist. You cannot rethink the 1,000-year flood because it is the 1,000-year flood. Just because it's happening more often, you don't say it's not the 1,000-year flood. This is the dumbest shit I've ever heard. And I'm a scientist. It's not science. You can't rethink something that is based on 100,000 years of data.
Well, they're just
baseline. 200 years of data. It's the 1,000-year flood. It will never be nothing but that.
It's the same thing. It's the exact same thing that BOM did with their weather station data. That basically they didn't get what they wanted out of the data, and so they basically said, "Okay, no, we see a change coming in the future, and we want to reset some baselines." And those baselines are the fundamentals that stand up your history of what's actually occurred. And it's the quickest way to destroy the value of data is to destroy a baseline. So you create a baseline and you do it for a particular reason and you document it, you record it. If you want to reset that baseline, you create a completely new data set and you create a brand new model from scratch. You don't intersect it with old data. You create something new and you basically sit them side by side and you go, which one's correct? From a data management perspective, that is the only way you can actually deal with empirical data and change baselines.
Yeah, so they're frauds.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Plain and simple. And it's happening everywhere.
Some people think we're settling into a mini ice age. What are your thoughts on that, Giles?
Not yet. The grand solar minimum theory to me relies on a slow decadal oscillation continuing, and so we have to see a decade of cooling before we know we're in it. Regardless of the solar cycles, we've still got to deal with the lag in the oceans, and the lag in the oceans will actually totally ignore volcanoes for a period of time to a certain degree. And so if you've got some large volcanic explosions, yeah, you'll get some short-term effects of 18 months, 2 years, but then it'll return. The trend that I've been watching is the Southern Ocean and ice pack around Antarctica, as well as the Southern Pacific. And so I spend a lot of time watching the sea surface temperatures in the southern half of the Pacific in particular. And the interesting thing that I'm seeing is that there's been a long and steady constant cooling trend in the Southern Pacific. Now that aligns with
this is going to be the trifecta.
This is the decadal oscillation,
and people are scared about it. Now, many people are claiming, no, it's not going to happen. Almost 80% of the models are saying it can't happen. But I think the 20% are probably right.
The models are missing a huge chunk of data, and we know that they're missing all of the solar particle forcing, magnetic, and galactic cosmic rays. So they don't
Hungatunga.
they don't include all of the continual forcing that occurs on our biome at every layer of the atmosphere down to sea level.
The most important thing that has happened in the last year is the Hungatunga eruption, the highest stratospheric injection in 100 years. I mean, since the major Pinatubo eruption, and people don't give a shit. They don't care. They don't care that the data is trickling in, and every scientist that looks at it is like, oh my God, it changed the sunset. It changed. And then I saw this week a few articles coming out from the lamestream media saying that the Hungatunga eruption is going to warm the earth. Now,
well, they got no clue.
This is the funniest thing. As a paleoclimatologist, no eruption ever in historic history that was as large as Hungatunga or even magnitudes less have warmed the earth. Every single one of them have cooled the earth based on all historic and all scientific data. So why the fuck would the largest eruption ever since Pinatubo warm the earth? This is the dumbest shit I've ever heard. And this is the paradigm we live in. It is literally 1984, the Ministry of Information, and complete gobbledygook.
Yeah, well, look, it's quite simple. We saw what occurred with Pinatubo, all right? The reality is, though, that Pinatubo didn't have instantaneous changes. They took time, and they took time for the oceans to respond. And that's the reason why you've got to incorporate this into your data models and into your climate models. They haven't accurately brought in the lag cycles of these events. And so anytime there's a space weather change, that's a manipulation at different levels of the atmosphere. It's eventually a manipulation of the oceans as well. So until they're actually using all of the data that's available to them to actually incorporate the entire picture of energy, and that's what this is. It's all just how the energy is imparted in our biome. And, what happened during COVID? There was a massive reduction in aerosols as well, okay, because planes weren't flying.
Holy schmackaroli.
All right, so effectively what you've got is a potential reduction in aerosols, which created a little warming period. You've then got Hungatunga, which has then put a huge amount of aerosols back into the atmosphere and creating a cooling period. And so if you don't understand that, you miss the entire picture, and then you've got to watch the ocean sea surface temperatures to see how they respond over time.
Well, and those are very cool over the Pacific. So, hello, Pacific Northwest. I think that
they're getting very hot up north as well.
And I'm going to make a prediction here, first time on the show for the winter. People have been asking me for a winter prediction. Washington State will be on lockdown, and the highlands there are gonna receive more snow than has ever been seen before, including the Olympic National Forest. I think they call it that. I'm not quite sure. But Oregon as well, which is in drought, will get heavy snow. Northern California, those reservoirs that we've seen almost fill to potential of burst will burst.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate for the people in Northern California, but the valleys will fill in this epic flood this winter or next winter. But I'm gonna go 68% major flood in California this winter.
Wow.
And I hate to say it, this is the first time I've ever mentioned it. So if you live in a low region there that has flooded historically, like 1936 or back in the 1800s, you may be fluxed. But let's get to a few more questions. Giles, did you put up the snow poles in the greenhouse with the snow event?
No, not at all.
Do you have poles for that?
Yeah, so you can see there's some little tangs hanging off.
Yeah.
Every 2 meters, so I can put down an additional pole, because the greenhouse is designed to support 60 centimeters of snow. So that's about 2 feet of snow. I knew this event would be 2 or 3 inches, and so it wasn't worth actually putting them in for it.
Okay, I'm looking for questions here.
But I've definitely got them. They sit in the pile just down there in the corner, and I can put them in within half an hour, and that way the whole roof gets supported against the ground here.
Melinda Biddle gave us an amazing super chat for 25 Canadian bucks.
Awesome, Mel. You're awesome
too, but she is a friend of the channel. She's one of our supporters that has actually been on the ranch multiple times.
Yeah.
And listen to, I have a story about Melinda. She actually escaped Canada to come here for a period of time this summer because of the restrictions.
Yep.
And then when she flew back, when they kind of were lifted, when she arrived, they told her she could never leave unless she got the jab.
Well, as you know, I've attempted twice now to get over to spend time at the ranch as well, and both times I've been flummoxed by international events.
Yeah.
So it's a case
what are the restrictions coming from here, from Australia?
So at the moment, I think just about every COVID restriction's been released. You can come and go as you please now. I don't believe you even need to be vaccinated to come into the country anymore.
That's amazing.
Yeah, well, put it this way: I think there's been an awakening of the Australian population against the reaction that we had by particularly our state leaders on lockdowns. The structure of Australia basically means under federation, the states have effectively more power than the federal government to do quarantine. And each state implemented its own lockdown at a different level. As we saw down in Victoria, Chairman Dan, the pseudo-communist down there, decided that he would, enact his fellow Chinese mates' desires by, locking everybody down. There were discussions going on around forced vaccinations. Luckily, that never happened. But the whole vaccination thing here in Australia really it exploded because the state and federal governments gave the power to the organisations, and so rather than the governments making the decisions, they empowered the companies, businesses, departments, etc., to put a level of enforcement for vaccination in. Now, in some circumstances, some companies were letting people go. There are a whole bunch of police officers that rejected it. There are a lot of nursing staff that rejected it. They've all been sacked, unfortunately, and most of them have changed their careers because of that. I was working for the federal government at the time as a contractor, and it was recommended that it would be good for me to get vaccinated. It didn't impact my career at the time, though. So the only reason why I didn't want to get the vaccination, I took the Novavax purely because the place where my parents live basically said you don't see your parents face to face unless you're vaccinated, and so I waited until the traditional styled protein vaccine became available. You know, I had COVID 5 weeks ago. I had the night sweats. That was it. The vaccine was out of my system probably 4 or 5 months ago. So it's a case of my own immune system took care of it, and I only had the night sweats. I've had no impacts from it whatsoever. But I reckon I wouldn't have got COVID at all unless I'd had that vax.
Well, I disagree. I would never take this fucking shit-tard vax of any kind ever.
Correct.
Never, ever, fucking ever. Never, ever, fucking ever, 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 never. No matter what variety of any of this fucktardy of vax, never, ever, ever, infinity would I ever
I regret it.
That government shit in my body. Period.
I regret it.
And I'm not poo-pooing you, bro.
No,
and you did the right choice. You took the wrong vax, but my neighbor waited for the wrong vax. He took the Johnson & Johnson. It's not a RNA vax. He took it within 3 fucking weeks. He had shingles. He almost died, and then he had a stroke, and they had to put a stent in his neck, and he's 38 or some shit like that. It blew my mind. So anyone that is supporting this vaccine protocol can suck my fucking dick. It's complete garbage. Fuck you. Fuck you, NIDCA or NEF or in the WEF, anyone, the WEF, every single human. Fuck Donald Trump. He's the one that rolled this into retardation, which is where the whole fucking world is right now. Now, I have no more questions to ask. I don't want to get into vax. We're already demonetized. I might be taken off YouTube. Fuck Donald Trump for the rapid release of this genetic genocide. I don't even think that's a term. Genetic genocide, which has been created by multinational corporations that can fucking suck it. None of these people care about you. They care about their bottom dollar. They don't care about your health.
It always comes down to the money, mate. It always comes down to the money.
Yeah,
and
this has been the deconstruction of human health, the human biome for years. We hope you've listened to a few things we've said. Grow your own food. Know where your food comes from. Know where your farmer is. Your grandma was right. The food you eat is how you sleep. Period.
Well, you are what you eat, and if you're eating shit, you will become shit.
Yeah, you become shit. So don't eat those crunchies. Thank you all to our one-time donors, our Patreons. Giles, for you coming out of the woodwork and sharing your story. Final word.
Can I add one last thing? I read the comments from the video that I provided you on that snow event, and my heart is tremendously warmed by the comments made by your subscribers and followers. Thank you very much. It's a beautiful thing to see that so many nice comments about seeing me again, and it really made my day. Thank you.
Giles, you're a hero. And each and every one of you, each and every one of us respects you for who you are, what you've done, what you've gone through. And we all know that the facts are in the pudding. The pudding is that the bomb is not a scientific organization. Hello, wake up. And that people like Giles and I come here and we've done what we've done. Giles has literally put his career on the line to tell the truth. And this is the unique thing. Not a lot of people are able to weather the storm like you, Giles, where the people that you work with understood what you're doing. And maybe you did step away for a year to test your own resources. But once you jump back into the reality of the sheep world, they were willing to gobble you up because of your worth. You are one of the most capable people to do what you're doing. And I don't think that they care about what you actually think at this point. But I'm sure they're going to hold you to a protocol.
Yeah. Well, we'll put it this way: the next bit of work I'm doing has got nothing to do with climate or weather. So that's going to be a beautiful thing, and it may allow me to actually re-stand up my website and start getting some further predictions out, because I've been doing, as I've shown you, I've been doing a lot of predictions, which I sent to my father in particular. He's recorded all of them now. 19 out of the last 20 predictions that I've made with him, they've all happened within the period that I believed would happen, and within the scale of what I believed would happen. As I've shown you, I've even been getting to the point where I can pinpoint a sunspot and then predict a category of flare within a range. I don't know of anyone else who's doing that yet. I'd be interested to find out if anyone can actually predict a range for a flare event, but I've nailed 6 of them. 6 flares off.
Now that I know how to predict solar storms and during the solar cycle, you and I are going to be a bang up. So take the next 14 days off, and we'll get back together at the first week of September, around September 8th, when the next kick up and the sun is going to maybe potentially bring down society as we know it. Now, Giles, we appreciate you for the moxie you've had, the fact that you've gotten shut down by the industry in Australia, one of the most corrupt anti-science groups in the world, and you've risen to the masses. Now, your next career move, gratefully, is not in those realms. And hopefully you'll be able to bring back up solarminimum.net, and you'll continue the conversation.
Potentially some videos on YouTube as well. So I've still held on to my Solar Minimum Net YouTube channel, but it's just a case of I'll test the waters with where I'm going with my career, and then if I can lock in something that's valuable and long term, that's not in this space, that I can continue to tinker with predictions and write up what my thinking is. That's the path I want to take, because I want to be able to be of value to the wider population.
Everyone is Giles. Everyone in the chat is supporting us. There are dozens of people. They love us. Let's keep doing what we're doing. Let's keep doing what we're doing, bro. Keep growing. Keep growing what you're growing. I want you to get back to your job. Let's get back into the workforce. Let's make you maybe 100K in the next few months. And what you said earlier in this podcast, I want to reiterate. We don't have that much time left. My prediction 7 years ago is the same. I've never faltered. It's the same. It's the summer of 2023. That is the end game. And I based it on multiple flexure points. I based it on climatology. I based it on paleoclimatology. I based it on end of the empire. I based it on stock markets. And I don't think, if you don't have lots of money early on in cryptocurrency, if you don't have lots of hedged money, gold and silver, meaning not cash, in your buried in the ground, if you don't know how to grow food, if you don't know how to be resilient in these times, if you don't know how to hunt, you're totally fucked. And you should have been listening to us the entire time. We're going to continue to provide programs that will tell you how to be resilient in all of these empires. But the time is running short, 12 to 18 months. Giles, I think you actually said that at the beginning of the podcast. I will reiterate that. I don't think, if you're not prepared by the spring of next year, you will be prepared. So please hedge your bets. Go ahead.
For me, my time is very similar to yours, but I'm actually going to start getting close to an actual month, and maybe even a week in the prediction coming up soon. So I'll see if I can actually start narrowing down my thoughts on that. But for me, I keep on saying September next year. September next year keeps on coming up in everything everything just seems to align to this one date range, and the final straw will be a very powerful solar flare that knocks out the technology, and then the ultimate collapse.
Indeed. And we love you, Giles. We support you. We'll do everything in our power to continue these podcasts. We hope you get back here to the ranch And maybe you can stay here for long terms. Who knows what will happen in the future? Because if you do get here within the next year, it may be the week of the boom. Who knows?
We'll wait and see.
Be safe. We love you, bro.
All right, pal. Take care.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, let's assure the listeners that we're getting back together the first week of September to talk about the uptick in the sun.
Sure. And
because it's coming.
I'll probably be dealing with a massive weather event around that period as well. There's a very large energy pulse of wet weather coming in here about that time. So 200 to 300 millimeters in this area. So if you're,
let's
if you're
just throw that out there.
area,
here, look, it's August 24th, and Giles and I are both comparing notes earlier today, and we're both multidisciplinary scientists, and we have concluded that September 8th through the 11th, in my opinion, will be a major event in Australia and around the world. So stay tuned. And please record this to keep tabs on our asses.
see how good our prediction is. Yeah.
We love you, Giles.
Love you too, mate. And thank you to all of your subscribers and followers. You're all awesome.
God, they love you, bro.